Hello and welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. My name is Liam. I'm joined again by Jack.
Hello.
And so today we're going to be talking about the House of Ashes. So before we get into this, I have to let you know that there are spoilers ahead. So we will cover everything that involved Man of Medan and Little Hope. So if you plan to play those games and you haven't yet, or if you haven't played House of Ashes yet, I would recommend playing those games. And before you dwell into this and listen to the rest of the podcast. Great. So what we're going to be doing in this episode is a talk through of House of Ashes, basically. So each time we get to a Curator Cut, we're going to pause, talk about the episode, have our theories, how we think the episode's going, what we think the ending would be, that kind of thing. So we're pretty much going to talk, and you get to see our live reaction as we play the game. So Jack. So House of Ashes. We're dwelling into it later today. We've got our games ready to start. Are you excited at all? We've waited quite a while for this, so I'm ready to get stuck in.
I am, yeah. I mean, obviously, these games were supposed to be coming out every 6 months, according to the developers, when they first started this anthology, and it's now one every year. So, yeah, the excitement's pretty strong. I feel like there's high expectations with this one, given that the past two games have been slightly underwhelming for the sort of wide variety of people that have played, sort of as a general consensus. Speaking personally, I've given sort of a Man of Medan a 6 out of 10, and I think A Little Hope is 7 out of 10. I feel that Little Hope has a stronger story idea per se, and I do think that the twist is stronger, albeit that it does have flaws. And with Man of Medan, obviously, it's got a similar and very predictable ending, in my opinion. I sort of saw it coming from early on in the game. So, yeah, I'm really hoping that this one is stronger. I hope that the threat in this game is real, almost like Until Dawn, where the Wendigos were very present in the game.
Very much
So
real. They weren't in like Josh's head or anything.
yeah, exactly. What about you?
So obviously we covered it in our last podcast. If you want to look at it, descriptions below, I imagine. But so for me, it's actually the other way around. So I talked about how I very much preferred Man of Medan. Now it's very close. I very much enjoyed both episodes, both very flawed, both very enjoyable at the same time, though. So my theories were that although Man of Medan, the twist is much simpler. I quite like that about the game. It's a very simplistic ending. And Man of Medan I called the twist. Little Hope I didn't. I don't know who did, though. If you managed to catch the Little Hope twist, you're a genius, in my opinion. So I've gone and rated Little Hope a 6 and Man of Medan 6.5. And I know that might to some people sound harsh, and it's not like I'm underwhelmed at all. I just think that these styles of games, such as Until Dawn and Detroit Become Human, are in the 8s and 9s for me, that I have to compare them in a similar bracket throughout this podcast. So they are considerably lower, and it might be the fact that they're shorter, and that might play into the other games' hands. However, I'm very much preferred Man of Medan for that sense. Both have, in my opinion, characters which aren't the best. So, for example, Man of Medan's got Alex, who I still feel is a bit wooden. I wanted to see more there. I know Until Dawn has the benefit of being a longer game, so the 8 characters have so much depth to them. Man of Medan and Little Hope talk about 5 characters, so I thought that's quite a smart move. You've got less characters, makes sense of a short game, but I feel you could like easily get more depth out of the characters. I feel Alex is quite wooden in the first one, and in Little Hope, I'm not sure about you, but I quite like Andrew and Angela. John's pretty interesting as well, but I feel I'd always want more from the other two. We've got, is it Daniel and is it Tanya? Is it? No, Tanya's the past one.
Yeah, Taylor.
Taylor, that's the one. Taylor's just a bratty kid, and Daniel's just this nice guy. Like, there's not much to it, and I'd like to see more depth. So that's one thing I'm really hoping from House of Ashes, actually. I don't know about your expectations coming into this game, but what are you hoping to see from the characters, for example?
Well, I certainly hope, because I suppose it will be good to go into the plot to give it some context. So from what I've gathered from the trailers and a little bit of research I've done, this game is going to take place during the Iraq War, 2003. It's going to be American soldiers going into sort of an area of the desert where they'll be encountered by Iraqi soldiers, and by one way or another, they end up falling down this pit into the caves. Now, what I'm hoping for character-wise is that there is still some animosity there. I hope that, because I know that the theme of the game, what they're really trying to go for is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I hope that the game doesn't sort of push you into that area straight away. I hope that there does remain some conflict, and that maybe over the course of time, the characters, be it the Iraqi soldiers, the Americans, they come work together against the monsters. I think as well that it is, as a criticism, it is slightly off-putting. I don't know what you think of this. That the games use similar faces to what's been used in previous games. So I know that there are a couple from Man of Medan in there, and I think there's one from Little Hope in there that's used. I know that the developers in Come Out have said that this is intentional, that they want to sort of do something like an American Horror Story where they use the same actors or the same face models and feature them in every single game so that the player recognizes them. But I think it pulls me out of the drama, if I'm honest, because I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, well, you was in the game 2 years ago, as opposed to being immersed into the drama. So what about you?
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting you brought up the faces, actually. So, for example, if we look at a game like Until Dawn, you've got massive actors that play all the parts, even down to the stranger and the therapist, all like kids. And they're not in any of the other games. And I know there's licensing stuff involved, which, for example, Conrad in Man of Medan is a massive actor. And I know, for example, for him, he wouldn't be under the contract to be in any of the other games. But as we've established, a lot of the other ones, if you look at their IMDb's, they're not in much else. So they're pretty low time actors. And I imagine these actors would be pretty happy to be plastered throughout the games. And yeah, so one game we haven't really touched on because it's very different. It's a party game made by Super Massive Games, and that's Hidden Agenda. Now, Finn in that, and also Lieutenant Riggs also appear throughout the other ones. So Finn is also Daniel in Little Hope, and he's also Charlie in Man of Medan. Now, like you say, this could possibly be intentional, and I have a few theories as to why that could be. For example, it might be that the curator has all these different stories and he's imagining faces he knows in real life and he's applying them to the different characters and stories. There's one, for example, that I've built myself, which is, for example, you know how in dreams, I read somewhere that it's impossible for our brains to create new faces, and it might simply be the same faces you see, like with the American Horror Story style effect, where they will be littered in similar games for that very reason. And it also could just be, it sounds really weird and far-fetched. I don't think it's a theory, but it's one I'll mention nonetheless, is it could be the same sort of family and the same descendants, because they're all set in different periods. So, for example, Little Hope was set way, way before. And for example, a character like Daniel, yeah, he could possibly go on, and one of his ancestors might be a soldier who you'll see in Man of Medan, that kind of thing. I'm not sure if the timelines match up at all, but that is another theory. But at the same time, though, that could be us trying to cover for them, because it is possibly lazy writing, possibly lazy casting. I'm not sure how you feel about that. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, for everything that we've said, it could literally just be a financial thing that they've not got the money to create new face models, so they slightly change the existing ones, but clearly not enough because we notice that they've featured in other games. So it is nitpicking, but I think it's still worth saying because, as you said before, the standards were set so high with Until Dawn that there's really only that you can compare it against as the benchmark of a really good game.
Yeah, that's completely it. I just myself, whether it is intentional, I just do find it a little off-putting when I'm looking at Little Hope trailers when it first came out, and I'm seeing Charlie from Man of Medan's in it, and it does take away from the immersion for me. I don't know. I would personally prefer it if the faces were fresher, but it's what they have. It's what we're rolling with. We can clearly tell from the House of Ashes trailers and from the little teasers I've seen that Alex from Man of Medan, that face is coming back, and also Joe from Man of Medan and Lieutenant Riggs from Hidden Agenda is one of the soldiers as well, I believe. So I already know there's going to be two faces that we've already seen. So another thing I want to mention as well, actually, and each of these games seems to have a big actor coming in. So we had Sean Ashmore, who's been in countless things such as The Boys and X-Men, who comes in to Man of Medan, and we had Will Poulter, obviously a massive actor from Weird and Miller's, Maze Runner, Black Mirror, Bandersnatch. He went into Little Hope, and it seems like the big actor we have this time round is Ashley Tisdale, who I'm gonna be the first to admit I know very little about. She seems to be a Disney actress, and from someone from High School Musical, which I've never personally seen.
No, I haven't either.
Scary Movie 5 would be the only one I have seen, but I don't remember her part in that. But what I would say is that I do appreciate an actor or actress trying, different, genres in that. So it's clearly someone who comes from a children's TV background, musicals, and now they're dwelling into a horror genre. So it should be really interesting to see what she brings to the table. I'm pretty excited to see how that goes as well. So something I want to mention as well there. Oh, sorry, did you have a point there, Andrew?
No, all I was going to say is that she's going to be playing as a CIA agent as well, so it's quite a significantly different role from what she's been doing before. So all credit.
Yeah, so as this podcast episode unfolds, it'll be interesting for us to look back at whether she's doing a good job, whether clearly she doesn't belong in the genre. We'll have to see on that one. So yeah, that's something I'm going to keep my eye on. Something I wanted to mention as well briefly is the theme. So we talked about how I preferred Man of Medan over Little Hope, but that might be a bias because I'm more into ghost ships than I am into Salem Witch Trials, for example. This is a very different theme. So it's obviously Iraq War. It's set in the Middle East. There's some very topical points because there's war that happens, currently, with America and Iraq, all that. So is the theme of being set in the Middle East something that grips you at all, Jack?
It is because I suppose what they're sort of trying to get at is that although sort of there's conflict, obviously it's because it's between humans, this other threat completely blows that out of the water, and it will be how the characters in the game adapt to that situation. Obviously, as the player, you're going to have to make some choices if you want to put aside the characters' perceptions of the other within the game, for example, or whether you're going to sort of toe the line and almost, if you're sort of one of those players that wants to get everyone killed, for example, then you might take the more aggressive stance on that. So yeah, it is interesting. I think it's worth to note as well that there are actually going to be some game mechanical things that are going to be different in this game as compared to the previous two. So I know that the developers have installed a difficulty setting in this one because I think people in the last game, Little Hope, they thought that the quick time events were too easy. So they've actually put a setting in there like easy, medium, hard, so you can essentially tailor your experience to how difficult you want each quick time event to be, for example. They've also included a 360 camera system. So I think I'm right in saying that in the previous two games, you were very limited by the camera, like it was how the character walked seemed to determine what the camera was. Whereas in this, when you're exploring these caves, you're going to be able to sort of rotate on the spot and look at the whole sort of atmosphere and the world around you, which I think a nice little just adds to that sense of isolation, really, in this environment where you're clearly going to be threatened.
Yeah, definitely. That is actually interesting. I wasn't aware of any of those points. So, Man and Medan, obviously, yeah, the cameras were very restricting. I'm pretty sure Little Hope, there was the rotation on the streets, but I don't think anywhere else, maybe. I think when you go around the house, but yeah, Man and Medan, the cameras were a lot more restricted. And it is interesting what you say about the difficulty settings there. I wasn't aware they did that because, in my opinion, I found a few passages in Man and Medan very difficult. For example, I really struggle, and to this day, I haven't saved Junior yet. I really can't save him. I find the breathing exercises on some of the moments really tricky. But I would agree, Little Hope I found dead easy. When I knowing how to save each character, I was able to easily do it. While with Man of Medan, I still had to do some quick time events, and I very much struggled to keep Conrad alive. I know Conrad's someone very difficult to save. If he goes on the big ship, for example, he can either get crushed in a door, or he'll go up the ladder and fall. Very difficult to keep Conrad alive. So it should be interesting, and I actually might give myself a challenge and give myself a harder difficulty, and then yeah, let's see how that goes. No, interesting. So another brief point I wanted to just quickly turn to is the pacing. So something we very much critiqued in the first two episodes and the last episode was we felt it was very slow at the start. It struggled to get the game going for quite some time. So for example, Man and Medan, I would argue the diving scenes, everything on the speedboat is a little tedious, getting relationships sorted and all that. And it doesn't really start until it gets on the big ship, in my opinion. Little Hope, for me, like the pacing's a little off of just walking down streets a little too much, for example. With this one, I can imagine if it's as you've described so far, that there'll be a lot of conflict and then talking maybe about tactics about how they're going to go into this area. It'll be very interesting to see if they fall in the cave around the middle of the game, around the start, near the end, because I think that could be make or break for me. I'm hoping it happens earlier than later. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's earlier as well. I mean, again, to the point that these games are no more than 5 hours long. I think that maybe you should be giving sort of maybe a 15-minute introduction, which I'll come to in a minute. That's actually set thousands of years before the events of the Iraq War. But I think that it may be a 15-minute introduction. You have your curator scene, and no more than, again, 15 minutes to half hour to set up the relationships of the characters, which I believe there is a husband and wife in this game as well. Because I think you really need to get to the drama more quickly, which again with Man of Medan in particularly, it didn't do that, and Little Hope, there were peaks and troughs. So certainly pacing is something that I'm going to be looking into quite deeply with this one.
Yeah, definitely. And there's one final point I want to really cover, to be honest, and it's something that I mentioned in the previous episode, but I just want to look back at it, and that is the ending of the episode. So as you're aware, I felt a little underwhelmed, not with Little Hope specifically, more with the game developers that, in my opinion, they kind of did the same ending twice for two different episodes. And I'm really terrified that this third game is going to have the same ending, and it's going to make me think that this whole series is a one-trick pony. So obviously, Man of Medan, spoilers ahead, I've already warned, but Man of Medan, it was a hallucinogenic bio weapon. So all the enemies you see are simply in their heads. And on the second one, it was the main character who was all the characters, but he was imagining everything the whole time. So I'm concerned that this third episode is going to be similar. I already mentioned it. I don't have a problem with the endings per se. I just didn't agree with making those episodes back to back, having the same ending. I'm going into this possibly a lot more anxious than you, Jack, because I'm worried they're going to have the same ending. And if they do, and towards the end of this podcast, you're probably going to hear me in quite a mood. So yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. But is that going to be something you're looking out for? Something that you're worried they might do again? Are you confident that they'll veer into a different direction? What's your take?
No, I'm not nervous this time. I think that what is it? It's 2 games in. Well, this will be the third into an 8-game anthology, which, let's face it, they're going to want to see through to the end. I think that they've learnt their lesson from the community, that those endings weren't satisfying, especially, as you say, being put back to back. And although I do sit in that camp, I do think the Little Hope one, while it was a bit of a cop out in some aspects, I do think that it was clever in what they did, because if you look into it in detail, the fact that it was all rooted in trauma from the loss of the bus driver's family, you'll note that all the characters that he comes across in the witch trial segment, they're all faces of people that he's encountered in his life. So, for example, the executioner in the witch trial segment, that's the police officer that you meet at the beginning who stops the bus.
Oh, I wasn't actually aware of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and like there is some logic to it in the sense that he sees the policeman as the man that sort of sent him to his sort of current state of mind. So he was an executioner of sorts. That's why he was the executioner in the witch trials. Similar to the Asian man who, when he was a young boy, he just saw his family burned to death. The Asian man saw him with the matches and then reported
of course.
police. So in the witch trials, Anthony has judged the Asian man as the judge. That's why the Asian man takes the role of the judge in the witch trials, because he's interpreted him as the reason why he ended up going to prison for the situation at the house fire. So I do think it's interesting. So maybe I'm less harsh on them with that ending as most. However, we can't do it again. The threat needs to be real this time. It needs to be like the Wendigos in Until Dawn. If they want to add a twist in there that maybe these beasts are mutated humans from the past, that's the theory that I'm running with at the moment. I don't know about you. That would interest me, but they've certainly got to be present in the game.
Yeah, definitely, because for example, Until Dawn had twists, but they were very much literal threats, like you mentioned before. So I feel like they don't need to do it, and I really hope they don't. But we'll have to see. We've got the game ahead of us, and I'm excited to get stuck in, to be honest. Before we leave, obviously we'll give a rating of the game at the end. But yeah, do you think this game is going to do better than Man of Medan and Little Hope? Where do you think you see yourself rating it? I know it's such a far-fetched question because we've got very little evidence to go off, but have you got high hopes for this?
I do, actually. I do. Going into this, I hope that this is just a natural progression as it being maybe so like an 8 out of 10. Obviously, I've rated the first one 6, the second one 7. So the natural progression for me would be sort of like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. I think it has to be that way because, again, I wouldn't even say the community is divided on this. I think the vast majority of people felt let down by those endings. So this one really needs to galvanise people and almost kickstart the anthology again.
Yeah, I'd agree. If we're going on patterns, I went from 6.5 to 6, so it would be 5.5. But and if the ending it does disappoint me, it might well be. But I'm going to be optimistic here and think that it will be a literal twist or a literal ending. And I'm gonna rate it. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be around a 6.5 again or a 7. But obviously that's so little to go off. We don't know. We're gonna have to wait and get stuck in. But yeah, okay, sounds good to me. What we'll do is we'll, like I say, every time we get to a curator cut, we'll come back and we'll react to it. If it's like the last episodes, it will be done in 3 parts. So this should be a 4-part episode. So yeah, in part 2, we'll cover the first third of the game and we'll react, and then we'll bounce heads off each other to see how we're enjoying it, what our theories are, and yeah, just our overall comments. But yeah, so I'll see you in part 2. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the game anyway. Hopefully it goes much better.
Yeah, you too, man. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to it.